Good day, Junior Tikkie. This is Mrs. DeMelon speaking, and today we're going to look at the last activity 5 for the General Journal chapter. So, activity 5 says that the information for December 2021 presented below is taken from the books of DEJ Stores, and the business is owned by David Jonker. Record the transactions in the General Journal for December 2021 and close off the journals properly. Narrations are not required. And then they give us provisional totals. Remember that we have to take these provisional totals, and if they're not printed in the GJ, we have to put them in and then add them into the totals of the debtors control and creditors control at the end of the month. If we look at the transactions, there's the December 2021, and it's all on the same day, on the 31st, so we can just number them transaction 1 to 6 in our journal. The first transaction says that the owner David Jonker took stock for the following, or took the following drawings, and the first one is 5,000 Rand cash. Now cash will go into the CPJ, and it's not a General Journal transaction. But trading stock and stationery that he withdrew will have to go into the General Journal. The stock always at cost price, so we will use the 3,000 Rand and not the 4,500 Rand. And then the stationery valued at 320 Rand, that is the cost of it, so that is what that the owner will pay for it, and we will record it as drawings. Transaction number 2 says, a debtor, a potgieter, who owes 2,300 Rand was declared insolvent, and his estate paid 30 cents in the Rand. This has been recorded in the books of the business. The remainder must be written off as irrecoverable. So if 30% was received, 70% is still left over, and that is then the remainder that needs to be written off. So I make my calculation, 2,300 Rand times 70 over 100 gives us 1,610 Rand that I will write off as bad debts. Number 3, the owner, David Jonker, was unhappy with the stock that he took home and returned the stock to the business, 280 Rand. No entry was recorded. So this is a reversal of the drawings transaction in number 1. So you're going to have to do the opposite. You're going to have to debit trading stock, increasing again, and credit drawings. And they didn't say what the reason was that he was unhappy. It might have been the wrong color or whatever it might have been. So he just returns it, and you can assume that you can put it back into stock to sell to a customer. Number 4, merchandise costing 640 Rand was purchased and paid for by the business debit card and correctly recorded in the CPJ. However, when posting the CPJ, it was incorrectly recorded as consumable stores. So the entire transaction is correct, except that when it was posted, instead of putting it as merchandise or trading stock, basically, they put it as consumables. So when we have a correction of an error, what do? We draw our T accounts. So trading stock and consumables are involved. We debited consumables, which is incorrect. So I must now credit consumables and debit trading stock to put in the correct transaction. Number 5, goods returned by M. Mawema, a debtor, as per the credit note for 320 Rand, was incorrectly posted to the account of M. Mokoena, a creditor. A debtor. So in other words, the return was posted to the wrong debtor's account. So yet again, draw your little T accounts, otherwise you're going to get confused. So Mokoena and Mokoena is the two debtors. We posted it to Mokwena's account, so we credited Mokwena's account, which was incorrect. So I now need to debit Mokoena and credit Mawena to make it correct. So guys and girls, you can see, because the names are so close together, you are very likely to make a mistake if you don't write it down, and very carefully make sure that you are doing the correction in the right manner. Number 6, an amount for 550 Rand received from B. Smith, a debtor, in settlement of her account was incorrectly posted to the account of T. Smith, a creditor. So we put through a payment into a creditor's account instead of a debtor's account. So yet again, draw your T accounts. So Smith is the debtor and T Smith is the creditor. So we credited T Smith's account instead of B Smith's account. So you're going to have to debit T Smith and credit B Smith, so that we are sure that we have now entered the correct amount in the debtor's account. So if we look at the general journal now, the first transaction was the drawings transaction, where the owner took stock and stationery. So now you credit trading stock, credit stationery, and then we add the two together, the 3,200 plus the 3,000 plus the 320, to get a total drawings of 3,320 rand. And because this is the end of the transaction and no narrations was required, you have to draw a line to show the end of your transaction. On day 2, it was bad debts. So yet again we have bad debts debited, and we are going to credit 2 ledgers. 1, the general ledger for debtors control, and 2, potgieter's account in the debtors ledger. So that is why I prefer you guys to write there debtors control and a potgieter debtors ledger. However, note that the mark will be allocated for the debtor's name in the details and not for debtors control. So the debtors control is there as a reminder to post to the control account, but the actual transaction here refers to the debtor's ledger. So the amount was at 1,610 rand, and that was 70% of the 2,300 rand, and that is the debit then for bad debts. Then the credit will, in the credit column here, refers to the debtor's ledger account, potgieter, 1,610 rand. But then there's another ledger that debtor's transaction needs to go to, and that's the debtor's general ledger in the debtor's control. So the debtor's control will remind you to put in the 1,610 rand under the credit column in the debtor's control, so that it will be posted to the general ledger at the end of the month. And then we rule off the transaction. Transaction number 3 was the reversal or part reversal of transaction number 1. In other words, we're going to have to swap around this transaction, reversing it. So doing the opposite, debiting trading stock, crediting drawings. So we're going to show you that. And then with the amount of the returned goods, 280 rand, and closing off. The next transaction, number 4, was where we recorded consumables instead of trading stock. So draw your little T account so that you can see that was the wrong. So we have to credit consumables, debit trading stock to make it correct. And then only do you write it down, because if you just try and write it from memory, you are going to most likely make a mistake. So debit trading stock, credit consumables with 640 rand. And that's the end of that transaction. Number 5 is where we posted to the incorrect debtors account. So we posted to Mokwena's account instead of Mawena's account. Yet again, make very sure that you are doing the steps correctly by drawing in your little T account. So we have to debit Mokwena's account and credit Mawena's account. But these are debtors. So debtors, there's a double posting involved. So Mokwena will refer to the debtors ledger, 320 rand. And then debtors control must also be debited with 320 rand because of the double posting to 2 ledgers. The same with the next one. We have debtors control and Mawena. The Mawena refers to the debtors ledger account here, and that is then credited with 320 rand. But the control account must also be credited with 320 rand. Then transaction number 6 is a debtor and a creditor. So we posted to the creditors account of T. Smith in the creditors ledger instead of B. Smith in the debtors ledger. So we have to do what? To correct Smith, we have to debit T. Smith and credit B. Smith. And be careful, T. Smith is the creditor. So creditors control is debited with T. Smith. T. Smith will then refer to the creditors ledger account 550, and the creditors control reminds you above it reminds you that creditors control must be debited with 550 rand. But then we credit the debtor. So B. Smith refers to the debtors ledger 550, but we must remember that he is a debtor, so debtors control must be then credited with 550. And then we have to close off the journal by adding up. Remember, you have to go, if we have to go back to the previous slide, we're going to have to look at all of these transactions together, and you're going to have to say this 740 plus then everything in the debit column, and then this credit 427 plus everything, and then eventually if we have to add all of them together again, sorry for that, you will see the following. So we're going to add up and we see 1,054 debits for debtors control and 2,908 rand credits for debtors control. In the creditors control, we have a total debit of 1,380 for the month and a total credit of 565 rand for the month. And these totals will be posted to the control accounts as journal debits or journal credits on the debit and credit side at the end of the month. Thank you very much for doing this with me and learning about the general ledger. And the next section we are going to do is reconciliation. So then we have to check that two parts of the ledgers are equal. So in other words, that the debtors ledger is equal to the control account debtors control, or that the creditors ledger is equal to the creditors control. So that will be the next chapter that we will look at together. Have a very good evening. Goodbye from Mrs. de Melon.